Hello, and welcome to Dark and Stormy Book Club. On this episode, we talk with the author, Matt Cahill. Enjoy.
I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Radioland by Matt Cahill is put out by Walsack and Wynn Publishing, and it came out in October of 2022. There are whispers about murders on the scene in Toronto from bartenders, hairdressers, and others who trade in rumors. When the bodies are found, they are altered in disturbing ways. No one knows who the killer could be. Perhaps it is Kris, a troubled musician who has just reached a level of fame only to have his life collapse around him. Or perhaps it's Jill, a sensitive with a dangerous magic that calls strangers to her. As Kris struggles to deal with a childhood experience of sexual abuse, he finds a strange advertisement on a hydro pole. By answering it, he begins texting Jill, another lost soul, reaching out for connection. In bits and pieces, they share their stories, discovering truths about themselves and the people surrounding them, until they must face the danger that is stalking them both. We are pleased to welcome to the program Matt Cahill. He has a very different kind of book called Radioland.
Ooh.
Welcome, Matt.
Hi.
The reason I say it's different is there's not very many characters in this book.
You're right. It's a different sort of book. It's sort of a more internalized book than maybe what some people might go in thinking, where there's like the police officers and there's this person and that person, a lot of red herrings, etc.
Yeah, it's very internalized. It's the story of Kris, who was a musician, and he gets his big break, but then he gets hurt. Then we have Jill, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're both very introverted people, and they sort of live vicariously online.
Interesting.
Give us the elevator pitch of the book.
Yeah, I'll give you, assuming that the building we're in is like 24 and a half floors tall, I'll give you the 24 and a half floor tall elevator pitch. So yeah, this is about two people in a city that doesn't seem to care for them, trying to find connection, right? And it's one of the ironies of living in a big city is that you might think, oh, there's like 6 million people here, it should take nothing to find friends and comfort, but it actually can often be the opposite, and that anonymity enables some people to be comfortable, and with other people it's isolating. And you have Kris, who he's breaking out with his band, but then you've got Jill, who's in a much different situation where she's kind of running away from things, and she also has a sort of, for lack of a better word, a type of magic that allows her to, among other things, be invisible. And circling around them is a serial killer who we slowly realize might actually be one of them. It's sort of, as they say, it's sort of a literary thriller that sort of incorporates a lot of internal world as well as just sort of a little bit of social commentary as well.
Interesting.
the weird thing is they never meet through this book, right? They never
That's
actually meet.
that's the thing. It's this idea of two people who Kris happens upon a sort of arbitrary ad that Jill posts, and they end up having a text-based relationship. So throughout the book, they start to trade texts, and they find that they can share more between the two of them, these two otherwise strangers, through texts than they might in their sort of real life, non-virtual world, right?
Did you have this book planned that way, or did it just go that way?
That's a really good question. I wasn't quite sure whether they were going to meet, but I thought, you know what, this is how the world is sometimes. And there are many relationships out there where we don't meet the other person, and yet we are able to, even in the like the early days of the internet, using like ICQ and things like that. I remember having extraordinary conversations with people, and we never even so far as exchanged photographs, right? And so it's this kind of marvelous and yet at the same time kind of bittersweet, if not heartbreaking, way in which you can connect, and yet it's never quite what you want it to be, in the end.
My son, he's 23 and he's a gamer and online all the time. And he has friends all over the world. Like one of his best friends is in Ireland and they're never going to meet, but he looks forward to speaking to him every day.
Yeah, that's
It's
the way it
very,
works, eh?
It's
it's
really,
very interesting. So I have one that's going to be 22, and
Huh.
both gamer as well as drawing artist, and so a lot of different community.
Yeah.
And some of the relationships that are made are, I think, because you're in each other's pockets, like literally all the time, as opposed to how it used to be where you'd have to wait to get together. When can you have dinner? Let's talk on the phone.
Yes.
There's a difference too with the voice versus the words, because you have the time to kind of think of the word. And
Yes.
I've had a lot of conversations sometimes, like at conferences and stuff, where people are like, I don't know why I just told you all of that. And I'm like, do you know why? It's because I don't exist in your world. And the only person that is important to me
There
is
it
you.
is.
And so, like, you don't, let's say, for instance, someone is grieving and
Mm,
they talk to me about the grief. They don't have to worry about that it was my grandfather, that they maybe had an experience with them that nobody wants to hear about. But my
yeah.
only stake in this entire game is you. And so you don't have
Yeah.
to hide, I guess, as much
Yes.
or think of other people's feelings, because I'm not going to be hurt if you're like my grandfather. I'm going to be like, oh, wow, as opposed to talking to your mom, who's going to be like, that's my dad. And so I think there's the separation, but like you said, it then
That
makes
was a
it
good point.
sometimes harder to connect in person because you're used to not having to censor yourself. That when you become like work friends, they're now in your sphere.
Yes, it's like the rare time when, you're on a subway or you are in a
Yeah,
waiting room, and you just happen to start a conversation with someone, and suddenly a lot of the inhibitions that might stir up if it were somebody because there aren't a lot of consequences if you share something with a
right,
complete stranger. It allows you that freedom, right?
right. Or it can,
Now,
unless they're going to stalk you.
in the book, is there like a romantic relationship, even though they never meet?
No, it's not romantic. I sort of intentionally, that the previous book I wrote, The Society of Experience, there was something akin to that. I wanted this to be more about solidarity and more about kinship,
I like that.
if that makes sense.
it
Yeah,
really,
I like that.
Absolutely.
it really was a fitting book for today's world. It really fit right in there. This is
That's
the way
awesome.
we live now.
I'm
Yeah,
happy to hear
Uh,
that.
interesting. So
uh,
music wise, what kind of band does he have?
He has sort of like an alt rock band, and
As you do.
it's yes, exactly, and it starts off with them performing in Canada. There's an award ceremony called the Polaris Prize, and basically it's strictly about the most appreciated group of the year. They are runners up And so there's this whole sort of like anticlimax around, okay, we've done all the things and we didn't win the big prize. So what
Yeah.
happens now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and then that is something I think I do like books that go internal, simply because sometimes authors will write about things that they haven't experienced to be able to experience them without
Yeah.
having to pay the consequences for them. At least
That's a
that's
really nice. I really appreciate you phrasing it like that, right? The idea of consequences.
right, because you can make it however you want, but if you're going to do an authentic story, you kind of have to ride the train all the way through. Like you don't get to
Absolutely.
say, I won every award and I've done all of the awesome things awesome and nothing is ever going to touch me. You're like, I didn't win the award. So what happens then? And so
Exactly.
do you plan stories out? Like, do you plot? I know that that can be a 4-letter word for some people, but do you plot, or do you kind of know who you're starting with and then let them run on their own?
The latter. I sort of start the fuse, and
Okay.
it typically runs its course fairly coherently from that point onward. Yeah, so it didn't take too much figuring out. I think where it required a bit of grunt work was writing from the perspective, which is interspersed in the book, the perspective of the serial killer,
Yes.
who is sort of a tortured soul. So you have sort of 2.5 protagonists, right? You have the two main characters, and then popping up every once in a while is the serial killer who begins to wonder, why am I doing this? What is going on, etc., and having kind of an existential breakdown.
Huh. Now I
Oh,
like
wow.
that, because sometimes people like to write serial killers, and I know that we're supposed to like the villain should be just as strong, if not stronger, than the hero. Because
Sure.
if not, then what's the point of putting them up against each other? But sometimes people like to go a little too far, where they just everything is like, of course I'm doing the right thing. I should absolutely be killing everyone because I had a bad childhood. I love a villain that there's a part of you that's like, come on, like
The internal
that's
struggle.
right. That's in there. Can we like, how can I spark that so that you stop? And then kind of watching the struggle of how they maybe can't.
I certainly wanted to avoid a sort of, twirling of the mustache with the stovepipe hat sort of villain.
Yes.
Tying somebody to the train track.
Although that is
Exactly.
kind of fun.
Yeah, there's certainly a time and place for that, and so I think it's good to have the reader feel curiosity and not a little bit of empathy
Yes.
for the antagonist, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, so is your book an unreliable narrator?
I think it certainly can fall in there. Some people have described it as a sort of a cross-genre book, and certainly, I guess, from the literary point of view, it certainly works with the unreliable narrator part as
Okay.
well. Yes.
Is this going to be a series?
Nope, it's a one-off.
Stand alone.
Mhm.
That's it. That's it. One and done.
The
One
best
and
thing
done.
about those is you can kill anybody you want. You don't have to, keep
Yes.
people alive to go on to the next book.
It's true. Because, if there is no one left, you might have trouble unless you want to start writing ghost books, which that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
So when you say magic, are you talking real magic or like like spells and paranormal?
She has a power.
Okay, I just
Well,
wanted
yeah.
to check.
I appreciate it. And yes, she does have a power. And that was
Awesome.
also a challenge because I wanted this to be sort of like to play with this idea that, having a magical ability does not necessarily solve things. In fact, it can complicate things
Yes.
to a great degree, and it isn't liberating. It can often be complicating. And so I thought, what would it be like if somebody had a profound ability, but that only made things sometimes worse in the way that, say, somebody who, for an example, has like maybe undiagnosed ADHD or something like that, can have this profound ability to have this sort of sensory overload. And in some ways, that can be something that gives them an advantage in certain situations. And yet in others, it can be a disadvantage.
And so often with magic, because I do write some paranormals, I prefer that there almost has to be a consequence for using it. Because if you don't have a consequence for using it, you could just willy-nilly all over the place. If you can be invisible, you're like, oh, guess what? I want some Oreos and I don't have $5 in my bank account, so I'm just going to go get some. You have to want whatever it is that you're going to use this for. I wrote a book once, and this is off subject, but she gained weight every single time she answered a question with the tarot cards. So she was always out running.
Oh,
And
I
people
like
are
that.
like, why are you running? And she's like, just don't ask me any questions because now I have to answer them. But having something happen, I feel like it puts them in a position where they have to think about whether or not I'm going to pay for this.
As a reader, that is so true, because if something's too perfect, it doesn't
Definitely.
appeal to me. I need the flaws, I need the payback, and if it's too perfect, I'm done.
Right.
I think there is a toll that is paid when we have sort of particularly exceptional abilities sometimes, right? If you're reading a book and it's just victory lap after victory lap, then I don't want to keep reading.
Right.
No,
right.
because you have no growth. That's what I write cozy mysteries, and I know for a little while there, a lot of the characters weren't growing. They were just kind of Jessica Fletcher, I think, is a good example. I love her. I love her. I love her, but she doesn't necessarily grow as a character. She's just in there. She goes in, she figures it out. We love her brain.
Calbico.
Right. We love
Day
that.
in,
God,
day out.
don't ever put me anywhere near there. Everybody should be dead by now. The cemetery is huge. But she doesn't necessarily grow. I love to watch characters have something that they don't even have to not like it about themselves. They can like it and then realize that, well, this is actually an issue. And that's one of the things that you can do with the villains too, which it sounds like with the literary aspect, that you're moving 3 people or 2.5 people through quite the phase of now what?
Yeah, exactly. And struggling to accept themselves along the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Matt, what are you working on now?
I am putting the finishing touches on my next novel, which is a departure and a breath of fresh air. And I started it during the first year of the pandemic because I couldn't go anywhere. And so I was able to complete the manuscript in a handful of months, which isn't really par for the course for me, just because I have a day job and everything. Writing is something I can only really do in the margins. And so I was really happy that not only was I able to pull something off in such a short period of time, but it came out off of the rails feeling so complete. And so I'll be really happy when I'm able to hand that off to my agent and see what happens with Lady Luck, right?
We're talking about the pandemic and saying, if anything good comes out of this pandemic, I bet we get some awesome books.
There you go.
And music as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it has punished a lot of people, let's be honest, but I think it has also allowed some people to dig deeper and to really produce work that maybe, had the situation been different, they might have put off, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
So when you say departure, we're not writing rainbows for young adult, right? I mean, you can, if that is your thing, if it's puppies and a pot of gold at the end.
I think the one thing I wanted to do with it is make people laugh.
Oh, okay. We like to laugh.
Yes,
I'm
I like
always
to laugh
laughing.
too. And it certainly is a very sincere and touching book, but I also wanted it to have a much more satirical edge to it, which just allowed me so much more freedom to reach into areas and certain absurdities of life. And it was a really wonderful palette to use. Radioland is my second book, and the first book, The Society of Experience, they both have a very particular feel to them. And this third book certainly has its own feel to it, that's for sure.
Do you have a title?
But I'm not going to share it just because it's kind of a work in progress. But
Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah, they always change it anyway.
Yeah.
You know what? That's not entirely true. I'm going to throw this in there. I have 52 books out, and I have never had a title changed.
Really?
Wow, good for you.
Well, but see, I write cozy mysteries, and the titles are puns, and I love the pun. So I write things like Cremains of the Day, Grounds for Remorse, I wear my ghost goggles at night. Like this is not nobody's looking for a real deep meaning in the title. And I mean, and that's fine. That's I prefer the laughing also, but mine is usually more like maniacal.
Tongue in cheek and
Yeah. Mine is more like, ooh, are you ready for this one?
Right.
So
now, who is your
I enjoy
publisher,
that.
Matt?
My publisher is Woolsack and Wynn. They are based in Hamilton, Ontario. They are an independent publisher, but boy, they punch above their weight. And I've been really blessed with working with them on this and the previous book. Yeah, they're at Woolsack and Wynn online. Yeah.
Some of these independent publishers are really upping their game. We're hearing some really good things in the industry.
And I think maybe the part of the reason for that is the larger publishers are aiming for a more mainstreamy approach, which obviously has its audience. However, the independents, it gives them the ability to pick from the more difficult to place books, and from that you get sort of a broader variety of authors, certainly, and also stories to tell.
Well, and I think when you're smaller, you have sometimes less of a lead time. So when you're huge, you're looking at 2 to 3 years before your book comes out anyway. So if it is germane to today's society, you don't know how it's going to hit in 2 years. And they can also pivot very fast, and they have lower overhead. So they're able to say, you know what, this might have a smaller audience, but that audience is going to be rabid. Let's do this one. As opposed to, I need it to hit 50 million people. It's, I need it to hit 10,000, but they're going to absolutely adore it. And that can be two different things.
There are some ways that independent publishers can have advantages with respect to publicity as well, with their network of booksellers, et cetera. And so there can be advantages, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
When the next book gets ready to come out, be sure and send us a copy so we can review it and have you back on.
That would be fantastic. I would love that.
Matt, we wish you all the best with your writing, and we look forward to your next endeavor.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been a great pleasure, and I really enjoyed speaking with the three of you. I really appreciate it.
Matt, thank you again, and you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay, well, greetings from Canada, and I wish you guys the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
That was so much fun. Okay.
That was a really good interview. I am looking forward to reading this book, and Mom talks about it a lot. So,
here.
There it is.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
it's like I say, it's a little different. It's not a cozy, it's not a typical mystery. You don't have a sleuth as
So is it more like a thriller?
It's what you would call a intellectual thriller, because they don't act out as much. It's all up here. It's very cerebral.
Okay.
It's a very interesting read.
If they're going to do an audiobook, I would really love it if it was in his voice. Holy cow.
Yeah, he could do that easily.
Having previously studied music and done a lot of work with decibels and all that kind of stuff, when someone has a voice like that, I'm like, do you happen to have a grocery list that you want to read? And like dreams, goals, your
get the yellow pages out.
Yeah, right. You want to have a phone book?
Start with A.
So I mean, he does have a really nice voice. And so
yes, he does. He does.
When I was thinking about it, I was like, what else can we get him to talk about? Keep going.
You've been going.
Yeah. But that sounds like a fascinating book. I know I don't often go into literary books because I really am a big fan of genre, but this one sounds fascinating to me.
It really does. It's a different concept.
What it does, slow grow. It doesn't burn, it simmers.
Okay.
As you go, you're good.
Well, what he was talking about is the whole online thing, and that would be a simmer because you don't find out a whole lot at first.
Right. You don't get the body language signals. You don't get the lack of eye contact. For instance, if everything is text, I could sit here for 20 minutes and think of a way to say something and then retype it and then erase it and retype it and erase it
Absolutely.
until I've watered it down to where it's very vanilla colored, it's very bland, whereas when I first typed it, if I had sent it, it would have been fiery red. And so
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting concept because
Yeah.
unless you're just a one-offer with, if you shoot text like, lasers out of your
Like
eyes,
these kids
that's
do.
different. But some people really do. I know at my day job, sometimes I get an email and my response is not what gets sent.
Oh, you have to backspace.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, get rid of that. Don't
Don't send that.
accidentally send that.
One thing else I want to add about what we were just talking about is I met my husband online 25 years ago.
Okay.
And
I told you
we're
about
still
that.
and we're still together, and we talked more online than we ever do in person. And he's right. The inhibition was gone.
Right.
We didn't have to worry about what the other one thought, because we had no idea we were going to develop into a relationship. We talked for 6 months online before we actually met. He's right. We never even sent a picture to each other. At the time, it was a little hard to send pictures to each other.
Because you were working with dial-up. And,
Exactly. Gotta wait 2 hours while this thing loads.
And oh my gosh, don't anybody call me in the middle of using the internet and break that freaking connection.
Yep.
I like that aspect of it because now we have Zoom calls, but if that's not what you're looking for, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And good luck to him. Yep. I think we'll see more books like this.
Yeah. I'll be very interested to see what the third installment is. Like I said last time, when he was saying the first two sound dark, and so to see him,
I know he really left that. He kind of buried the lead on that, shall we say?
Yeah. He did say though that it's going to be satirical, which to me is a darker humor. So it's not like he's going to be running out with the over the top fun stuff
with clowns and
like a rom-com. I was gonna say clowns, and then I was like, well, but then there's it, so maybe not that. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be a rom-com. It sounds like it's going to be some sort of perspective on society today that will make you do that. Ooh, ho, ho, ho,
yeah.
Instead of the laugh out loud, I think I just peed myself.
Yeah, I'm looking. Let's wait and see what he does. I'm curious.
I look forward to it.
Me too.
Trivia. Last week's question was, which author was a cook at the Fair Isle Bird Observatory? A. Sharon McCrum. B. Anne Cleves. C. Jeffrey Deaver, or D. Anthony Horowitz? The answer is B. Anne Cleves. Anne Cleves studied English at the University of Sussex, but dropped out and took several jobs, including a cook at the Fair Isle Bird Observatory, an auxiliary Coast Guard probation officer, library outreach worker, and child care officer. This week's question is, which mystery author had a stained glass window installed in her memory at the Shrewsbury Abbey? A. Edith Pargeter or Ellis Peters. B. Agatha Christie. C. Josephine Tay, or D. Emily Dickinson? Tune in next week for the answer. Well, that ends another episode of Dark and Stormy Book Club. We hope you enjoyed Matt Cahill. His book is well worth reading, and I know you'll enjoy it. And we will be back next week with another great book, so be sure to tune in. And remember,
Life would be boring without a little mystery. Bye.